Hey guys, welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles! I thought the last episode would be the last one, but actually we still have a decision to make here. If you've watched the last episode, you know that we are about to search Mr. Gregson, Inspector Gregson. Or we can also search someone else. We can also just withdraw the request of searching him, so... I don't really know what to do, but... let me explain my thought process here. I think that he was so cool when we ordered to search him that the disc is actually not on him. I think that he slipped it onto somebody else. And that is why we're going to go with search someone else. So I'm gonna do that. Let's go. Yes, the defense formally demands the search be conducted. Well, don't say you weren't warned, but your typical Nipponese stubbornness may well land you in hot water this time. Perhaps the lesson will do you some good. Fair enough. I've got nothing to hide. Yeah, he is really cool about this. Very well then. Bailiff, conduct a search of the inspector's personal effects. The defense demands a search, but not of Inspector Gregson. What? Now what's all this? I'm the one you're accusing, aren't I? I thought you wanted to search me. No, Inspector, not you. Somebody else. What's the meaning of all of this, huh? Lost it at last, have you, sunshine? The court shouldn't have to put up with your nonsense. You're being completely irrational. Be quiet, all of you. Oh, okay, that was Gina, maybe? Oh, okay. Runer's doing what you all told him to do, and having the courage of his convictions. So you should respect that and listen to what he has to say in good faith. Because that's the British way. Well said, young lady. Indeed, this court is in awe of the defense's counsel's conviction and eagerly awaits his next words. You what? No, don't be hasty, my lord. If I'm not mistaken about the things I've seen in court today, I'm fairly sure that I know who was the disc at the moment. There's only one person it can be. Counsel, of whom do you request this search now? Well, let me explain my thought process. He was at the witness stand the whole time, so he either slipped it over or it was taken from him by Ashley Graydon or by Nash Salkin. It can't be Ringo because Ringo is too far away. It has to be Nash. I'm pretty sure it's Nash. It could also be Ashley. There's no way that first, maybe it's Van Zieks because it's more dramatic. Wait, okay, wait. Is it Van Zieks? This would be more. Although he doesn't have a clue about all of this, all he wants is to convict his accused. Is it? No, I think that it's actually Nash Skulkin.
Take that!
Of my lord, Mr. Nash Skulkin. Well, I never.
Yeah, blimey.
Me. Very well then, bailiff. Restrain the witness and conduct a thorough search of his personal effects.
Hold it!
Please, my lord. Inspector? Scotland Yard, has to object to the search.
Objection!
Unfortunately for you, Inspector, your objections carry no weight here. In this courtroom, only the prosecution and the defense have the authority to object. But Lord Van Zieks! I have no idea what forces are in play that might influence your actions. But personally,
I have no intention of obstructing the course of this trial.
Ah!
Bailiff, carry out the search.
No. Hold on, no more.
Hold on a moment, I don't know nothing. Nothing about the disc. Cut it out! Oh! Here, my lord, in the witness's pocket. I found this. Aha! Good lord, that's
Another music box disc.
I don't know nothing about it, nothing! That is the second music box disc left behind by Magnus McGilded. Is it not, Inspector Gregson? Ah! Order, order, order! Mr. Skulkin, what have you to say for yourself? Gordon Bennett, just Gordon Flamin' Bennett. I swear I didn't know nothing about that disc. Honest to God. Counsel, would you please explain what exactly is going on here? The alleged deal that was struck was between this witness and this detective, no? Without question, my lord. Then, for pity's sake, why on earth was this man in possession of the disc that the inspector traded for information? Inspector Gregson is a shrewd, calculating man who rarely loses his composure. But at one particular point in this trial, he exhibited some unusual behavior for a brief moment. I don't recall what unusual behavior. It was, yes, during my cross-examination of Mr. Graydon. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with a second disc in your jacket pocket? I admit to nothing of the sort. Yeah, while Mr. Graydon answered my questions, the inspector appeared to have grabbed Nash Skulkin by his coat and was shaking him violently. Yeah, he did it all. Thought me noggin was gonna fall clean off, I did. I was wishing I'd be born as me brother, I was. And what exactly happened to make the detective attack you like that? I ain't got a clue. It just suddenly turned and grabbed me. It wasn't like that and started shaking me. Why the blazes did I mention the third gun when he would get you down to the station? That's what he said. Yelled it right down me ear, all it did. My knees all throbbing now. The way the detective behaved, that was extremely out of character. But looking back now, it must have been that he did it. That was the opportunity Inspector Gregson created for himself in order to hide the disc. Well, bless my wig, he did it? He hid it? You! But I'm afraid I failed to comprehend the motive here. If the detective had acquired the disc he was after, why on earth would he then proceed to hide it in another man's pocket? This is a court of law. He could have submitted the item as evidence.
It would appear, my lord, that the inspector was not at liberty to do that.
Why ever not?
As the man himself revealed earlier, his current assignment has some special conditions.
My orders were recover the medium and use to convey the secrets leaked from the ministry. And do it on the QT, strictly hush-hush.
Hush, hush. A top secret assignment, is it?
As far as we're aware, the information stolen comes from confidential government communications. It would seem that if that information were to be revealed in court as evidence, it would be problematic. Does that sum up the situation, Inspector?
I'm operating under direct orders from the ministry. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to answer that question.
So, realizing there was a chance that you might be searched here in court, You took steps to hide the disc you had acquired from the witness.
Oh, does this mean? He only pretended to attack Mr. Skulkin in order to get close enough to him, to slip the second disc into his pocket. So it was all a pretense? Well now, Inspector Gregson, and you, Mr. Graydon, are you prepared to admit to the accusation made against you of this alleged deal? Admit to it, yours truly, please. Mr. Graydon, clearly our Eastern visitor has an uncommonly active imagination. However, there is no proof that I passed that disc to the inspector.
Objection!
But then, how do you explain the reason why you knew about the peephole? I'm under no obligation to explain. What? Yes, I lied in my testimony, that I admit, so sentence me accordingly. But that is all I admit. Murder, leaking government secrets, striking a deal with a detective, all of it is this young Eastern man's fancy. I have no idea what any of that is about. You... what? Oh, come on. Are you serious? Well, what about you then, Inspector Gregson? Do you admit to making a deal with Mr. Graydon in order to acquire the disc?
Ladies and gents of the jury, as a Scotland Yard inspector, I will declare this and nothing more. I am acting in the best interests of the country. Whatever I've done, it's been in the name of justice. So, as members of the public in this fine country, I'd like to think that justice will be your guiding light when you're making your decisions.
This is quite a quandary, indeed. Rarely have I encountered such extraordinary tumultuousness in the concluding of a trial. Nevertheless, in the absence of any further evidence to be presented, I believe it is time that we put the matter to the jury for the final leanings. Well now, as a fellow servant of Queen and country, I must say I sympathize with the old inspector. Yes, he's a dependable man. I'm quite sure in service one becomes a good judge of character.
Even crossing your eyes doesn't help with it comes to looking at this case. It's all blurred to me. Well, as a fellow professional, I like to put my faith in the detective, really.
Graydon's highly skilled operator, stop! Currently in presence of idol, stop! Detective has very much trust in eyes. More than this, I cannot say. I don't believe it. These 6 jurors are... they're going to believe Gregson if they declare their decision now. Is Ginny going to be found guilty? If I don't manage to produce some definitive evidence right now, then we're going to lose. Either some proof that Graydon killed Mr. Windybank or stole those government secrets. Or some evidence to force Gregson into admitting that he struck a deal with the witness. Well then, counsel, I think it's time I imposed on the jurors to declare their final decisions, no? That is, unless you have some compelling evidence you have thus far not presented to the court. If I let the judge call on the jurors to announce their leanings, Gina will be found guilty. So there's no choice then, Bruno. You have to throw some more evidence at them. This is it now. It all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against, Gregson or Graydon? Oh, really? We're still... Okay, I was so sure that we're coming to an end. Okay. We could also just leave it to the jury. But then they're just gonna declare Ginny guilty, so there's no way. So it's either Graydon or Inspector Gregson. But we don't have anything against Graydon. Let me have a look at the court record. Let me have a look at the court... Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Okay. Okay, guys. I'm sorry, but okay. So here's my thought process. Graydon. We don't have anything against Graydon, but Gregson is so eager for the secret not to be revealed that I think that it should be Inspector Gregson. That's going to be a sure thing. Inspector Gregson, there's one final piece of evidence I would like you to see.
And what's that then?
If you refuse to acknowledge that you did in fact strike a deal with the witness here today, then you leave us no choice but to examine this piece of evidence thoroughly.
Well, go on.
This is my last chance. It looks like I'm going to have to force his hand here. One final piece of evidence to get this detective to admit to the deal he clearly struck with Graydon. So I'm gonna present either the music box or the music box disc. Wait a second, do we... Nah, there's no way that... Okay, so we already... Nah. Is it the music box disc? Or is it just the... I'm gonna present the small music box again.
Take that!
Is that Mr. McGillicuddy's peculiar music box, Counsel? Yes, with the disc already in place, ready to play. I think perhaps now would be a good time to listen to the sound produced by the music box again. Only this time, with the second disc we've just discovered set in place as well. Goodness, this disc, Counsel.
Hold it! No, wait! I can't let you do that!
Why not?
Because, well... Because it's got nothing to do with this case, that's why!
Objection!
Not true, Inspector. The defense has already proposed that the sounds heard by the court earlier from this music box were part of a Morse code message. We know that Morse code is comprised of two distinct tones. The defense believes that the second disc contains the second tone needed to complete the message. And now we have a chance to confirm that theory.
For crying out loud, Sunshine, we're talking about state secrets here! If you got let in the whole courtroom hear confidential information like that, it's treason!
Then do you admit the charge? That in order to protect those state secrets, you engaged in unlawful dealings with the witness.
You're mad! If you let the secret information out into the public domain, you'll be making an enemy of the entire British government, you idiot!
Objection!
Let's not forget, Inspector, that you, a Scotland Yard officer, leaked confidential case details to a witness. That you continue to lie to the court, and all because by fair means or foul, you're determined to do your duty. Well, by fair means or foul, I'm prepared to do mine.
Don't you dare!
I will stop at nothing to protect my client. I don't care who I make an enemy of. My lord, if you please. The court must hear the sounds made by that music box.
Come on, Zakes! For Pete's sake, stop it!
Objection!
Inspector, you should know my methods by now. I'm a prosecutor. I'm not Scotland Yard puppet. In this courtroom, my duty is to the law. So let me propose a toast to uncovering the truth by fair means or foul.
No!
Very well. The defense's stance here and that of the prosecution has been made very clear, I feel. Therefore, in accordance with the defense's request, the court will now listen as this music box is set in operation once more. This time with the second disc in place and both discs playing simultaneously.
Oh, listen to that. It's unmistakable now.
It's Morse code.
All right, I admit it. Whatever you want. But for the love of God,
Shut that blowing box up! Let me ask you again then, Inspector Gregson. Did you or did you not strike a deal with the witness next to you in the stand, Mr. Ashley Graydon? Specifically, did you furnish the witness with confidential case details in exchange for this music box disc? Did you reveal the existence of the peephole in the pawnbroker's storeroom door, Inspector?
I did.
Stop! What are you doing, man?
It's all exactly like the young Eastern lawyer said. When the trial resumed after the recess, and we were stood here in the stand together, that's when he approached me with a deal.
Shut up, you imbecile! Shut up!
Psst, you there? You're the detective who turned up at the pawnbroker the other day, aren't you? I may have something you're looking for, Inspector. With me at this very moment. So how about a trade? I suggest you accept. Or information that may make certain individuals uncomfortable will soon become very public indeed.
I couldn't let that information become public knowledge. Not under any circumstances. So I accepted the man's proposal and told him details about the case that should have put him in the clear. The peephole in the storeroom door and the bloodstains on the overcoat. By giving false testimony, this witness intended to have the defendant wrongly accused of murder. Inspector, you knew that. Yet you still revealed those details to facilitate the witness's perjury. I did. But then it turned out the peephole had only been made that night, after the incident took place. Scotland Yard wasn't aware of that, if I'm perfectly honest.
Well, Mr. Graydon, what do you have to say for yourself? There's nothing and no one left for you to hide behind. You struck a deal with the inspector in order to escape conviction of a very serious crime. Namely this. You are the third intruder who broke into the pawnbrokery on the night in question. And you perpetrated the murder of the proprietor, Mr. Pop Windybank. You... Traitor! Bailiff! Bailiff! Restrain that man! At once! That's it then. It's all over. I despised my life growing up. Those slums are wild places. I was cursed from birth, born into poverty, the son of a penniless artisan. My parents did nothing but quarrel all day long. What little money they had was never spent on me.
So I set about studying to better myself, to one day escape from that hellhole.
And you eventually became a communications officer. I admire your determination.
But then you decided to try to sell government secrets. Why? Isn't it obvious? Because I wanted money. Even now, years later, the nightmares of my life in the slums wake me in the small hours. I wanted to drown them out with more money than anyone who lived in that squalor could ever imagine. Then one day, I met him. Mr. Magnus McGilded.
You're a fiend with a queer talent, so you are. I've money to throw your way if you're interested. All you need to do is go along with me little plan now.
I was to steal the ministry's telegraphic message logs, and McGilded would buy them for a handsome sum. As I was responsible for inspections of the ministry's communications office, it was a simple enough task.
The lure of the devil's offerings. How easy it is to succumb.
But you must surely have realized the seriousness of the crime you were committing.
And for that reason, I took great lengths to ensure that my actions were untraceable.
By using the music box.
My father was a brickmaker, though my mother divorced him when I was still a child. Yes, Mr. Mason Milverton. That's right. He was very skilled with his hands. He'd once been a music box maker's apprentice. I imagined his skills would be sufficient to create a machine that could generate Morse code. So I sought out my father again to employ his services. It was the first time I'd seen him since I left the slums 10 years earlier.
Look at you, Ashley. What a fine gent you've become, huh?
He was a different man to the one in my memory. A thin, frail old man. But poverty had never broken him, never corrupted him like it had me. I was sure that he wouldn't help me if I told him the real reason. So I made up a story. I've got some work for you, father. I need some music box discs made.
Music box discs? Huh?
A musician friend of mine has written some music he wants to sell to the public. I've brought the score with me. There are two, actually. I'd be
delighted, son. It's been 20 years since I did any work like this, though. Fetch my tools, would you? They're in the loft.
That's how I had him make the two discs.
Thereby splitting the information in two. You were taking considerable precautions indeed.
It was to protect myself as much as anything. It meant that I could deal with McGilded in two separate transactions. The first involved the first of the two discs and the music box for playing them. I exchanged them with McGilded for 10 guineas. Then, on receipt of the second disc, he would pay 1,000 guineas. So, what happened on the omnibus 2 months ago? Was the second part of the deal the exchange of the second disc? Yes. I'd sold the man information that way a number of times already. But it seems he became reluctant to part with his money.
But that doesn't quite make sense, Mr. Graydon. Or why was it that on the omnibus 2 months ago? Your father, Mr. Milverton, was the one dealing with Mr. McGilded and not yourself.
When I received the 1,000 guineas after my first completed dealings with McGilded, I decided to give 200 to my father for his troubles. But my father realized something was amiss. In time, he worked out that I must be involved in something dubious. And when he did, he said to me,
Next time there's an exchange, you'll let your old man do it. Understand? Otherwise, I won't take your money anymore.
that was my father's way of dealing with it, I suppose. Climb into the omnibus, hand over the second disc and take the money from McGilded. That's it. He had no idea what was actually on the discs I'd asked him to make. He never knew. Just like I'll never know why everything went so horribly wrong that night. All I know is that the disc was taken from him, and he never returned home. It was only then that I found out what sort of a monster McGilded really was. So after 10 years of not once uttering it, I swore on my father's name. To exact revenge. Revenge?
As anyone with even the remotest knowledge of the man will no doubt be able to imagine, McGilded brought all his wealth and influence to bear in the most despicable of ways. To crush any semblance of justice in his trial. The crime scene was tampered with, evidence was fixed, and witnesses were bribed. That trial 2 months ago was a farce from start to finish.
My feet had barely touched British soil back then, and I walked into the hornet's nest, completely unaware of the sinister background to it all. I made plenty of money out of my dealings with McGilded by then, so I spared nothing in my arrangements 2 months ago. I knew exactly who to hire. If you're willing to pay the price, there are people in this city willing to do anything you ask. McGilded himself had shown me that. Are you saying that? I think you have the picture now. After he twisted everything to his favor in this courtroom to ensure that he walked free, I took matters into my own hands and delivered the justice that monster deserved. That tragic accident following the trial here 2 months ago was planned and executed by yours truly. McGilded's death that day was caused by this man.
Everything is ready, sir, if you'd like to follow me into the courtroom. What's this, officer? 'Tis sooner than I was led to believe. I hope it's not inconvenient, sir. There are some changes to the schedule. Well, I must be making tracks now. 'Tis time for the inspection. They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself.
So that policeman who came to tell McGilded he could examine the omnibus. That's right, an imposter hired by me. McGilded used his wealth to manipulate the trial. He paid people to adulterate the omnibus with all manners of false evidence. He threatened witnesses to lie in their testimony.
So I gave the man a taste of his own medicine. Once the omnibus was doused in paraffin, one of my sham policemen ushered McGilded inside and sent him on a one-way journey to hell. An eye for an eye. That's how I avenged my father's death. A spine-chilling account indeed. But that wasn't the end of it for me. There was a loose end, you see. A loose end? Yes, I should think it's obvious. The second disc, which my father had to take into exchange with McGilded. Ah, yes. There was indeed no mention of it in the man's trial 2 months ago. Clearly because it had been removed from the scene of the crime. When I realized it was missing, I remembered something. Something from the first time I dealt with McGilded. This is the first of the 2 discs, and the music box you need to play them.
Well, look at that now. What an ingenious little invention. So then, promised? 10 guineas for you, young man.
What's this? Windybank's pawnbrokery?
Aye, 'tis a pawnbroker's ticket, so it is. You can use it to redeem an article I've deposited there for you. There's no need to give a name. Just hand over the ticket and tell the fiend the watchword. I've put a jewel in pawn for you. I'll fetch a good 10 guineas. It'll fetch a good 10 guineas if you sell it. So it will.
I've never heard of a pawnbrokery being used in quite that way before.
Have you not, Mr. Graydon? London's pawnbrokeries are very useful places, you know. Each one is like an extremely secure vault.
So I knew that if I had taken steps to hide the disc, it would be in that pawnbrokery somewhere. And that on the night he killed my father, he must have entrusted the ticket to someone. Yes, to Gina. I remember now that when we first met you at Windybank's that afternoon 2 days ago, you had a description of Miss Lestrade written down. How did you know who you were looking for? From the trial. That pickpocket's testimony was clearly peculiar. Anyone could see that. I realized immediately that she was another of McGilded's pawns, that he must have threatened her somehow. I was fairly convinced it would be her who had the ticket, so I started to make some inquiries. I had a strong suspicion the girl would come out of the woodwork on the redemption deadline. And he was absolutely right. And yes, sure enough, she did. All I needed to do was to wait until the girl went to Windybank's to redeem the articles. But unfortunately, she redeemed only McGilded's overcoat and the one disc that was in its pocket. The all-important music box with a second disc inside was missing.
Because it had already been forfeited 2 days earlier.
But I was unaware of that fact. Had I not been, I could have avoided my nighttime excursion.
Meanwhile, as our investigation into the stolen government secrets was progressing, we'd picked up on the fact that McGilded was involved.
Inspector, you've recovered fast.
My orders were to recover the stolen information as quickly as possible. So we started gathering the fellow's possessions and examined whatever we could lay our hands on. We had a full-scale investigation going on at the yard, but we had to keep it as quiet as we could.
Then, when the inspector here took the disc from me in the pawnbrokery that day, I became nervous. I was sure the music box and the second disc was still there in the shop somewhere, so I knew that it was a race against time. I had to find those articles before the police did. So that's what prompted you to break into the place that same night. With the help of your old friends, the Skulking Brothers. What happened that night in the pawnbrokery, I can only describe as a nightmare. While Nash and Ringo were searching the counter, I'd located the music box I'd sold to McGilded on the shelves of the forfeited articles.
And the second disc was inside?
Yes, I slipped it into my pocket with a very deep sigh of relief. But then, something entirely unexpected happened. What are you doing in my shop? A gunshot rang out in the shop, and I felt a sharp pain in my left arm.
The broker fired his gun, and the bullet pierced through your limb.
Yes, exactly, but unfortunately, I'd decided to bring my own gun with me that night, just in case. Before I knew what was happening, I'd fired back. The man had already turned to flee. I hadn't intended to fire in his direction, much less kill him. But unfortunately for both of us, the bullet hit home. It struck him in the middle of his back as he fled through the storeroom door for refuge. A sorry, sorry tale. It all took place in the blink of an eye. I don't imagine Nash and Ringo even realized what happened at first. I was terrified, so I fled. And that's the whole story. That's everything that happened at Windy Banks on that wretched night.
Earlier you called McGilded a monster. A man who used Hitler's wealth and influence to distort the facts and escape justice for the crime of murder. What tragic irony, for what you have done is exactly the same. You've become the very monster you saw and despised so deeply in McGilded.
Yes, I think I have. Well, this has been a long and exhausting trial. However, it would seem that at last we have arrived at the truth. Inspector Gregson, what of Mr. Ashley Graydon?
He's been restrained, my lord, and is being escorted to the yard. He'll be charged with the murder of Mr. Windybank and the stealing of government secrets.
Very good. And you, Inspector? Regrettably, you will have to face the charges yourself.
Yes, my lord, of course.
It transpired that you were complicit in helping a criminal escape justice that fact remains, whether or not you were doing so in the line of duty. The crime is a serious one, Inspector, and inexcusable.
Now to the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade.
Yeah?
It is time for the final education. Is the jury ready, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, sir. Garrett Squadron standing by, sir. This is really it now. The last push, the final call, the finishing whistle. My men are ready to deliver their verdicts.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You will now declare your final decisions to the court.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Haha, that's the stuff! I'm off the hook! Finally, Reno, you finally managed to do it! Finally is the word. I really wasn't sure if we'd come out on top for a while there. Susie was right, you're the best lawyer in the world! Miss Lestrade, I am not finished with you yet. What are you looking at me like that for? Before you start enjoying your freedom, there are certain other crimes to consider, 2 months ago, in my courtroom no less, you gave false testimony, did you not? And in relation to the trial today, not only did you unlawfully enter Windybank's pawnbrokery, you also attempted to abscond with Mr. McGilder's property, it seems. I never done nothing of the sort. Of course not. It's not like you were gleefully wearing McGilder's coat in your cell yesterday or anything. And just when I was getting excited about throwing a party for Ginny this evening. And turning our attention to the defense. Determining that when played together the music box disc contained a message in Morse code was, well, it was certainly a most unexpected revelation, counsel.
Quite so, my lord. The prosecution was caught entirely off guard. In fact, I think we should applaud my learned friend's courage here today. I propose a toast to demanding that government secrets be disseminated before the entire courtroom.
Very sorry about that. It was the only way that I could get Inspector Gregson to admit to what he'd done, so... If I may say something on that point? Isn't that? It's about the sounds produced by the music box before. I do wonder if that was really Morse code at all. What? What are you saying, madam? Oh, well, it's just that I'm really rather fanatical when it comes to Morse code, you see. So much so that the whole world seems to be covered in dots and dashes to me, in fact. Goodness, madam. An unhealthy level of obsession, one feels. But I must say that in my opinion, the sounds produced by those two discs were nothing more than that. A meaningless series of two different tones. What? Can that really be? It wasn't Morse code after all? My lord, the defense would like to listen to the music box again.
Are you off your nut? How many times do I have to tell you those discs contain ministerial secrets, sunshine?
This courtroom is not an appropriate forum to discuss the nature of the government communications. We know McGilder conspired to trade national secrets with our enemies. Secrets acquired from Mr. Graydon. Now that the man has admitted to his crimes, we have no need to pursue the matter further.
But it's really going to bother me. Miss Lestrade.
Yeah, my lord.
That which you have seen today here in this courtroom has been extremely disturbing.
Falsified evidence, intimidation, perjury. A grim catalogue of depravity.
An appalling experience to befall any child.
Come on, it ain't nothing I don't see most days in the back of slums.
I beg your pardon?
If you're weak, you pay for it. That's just how love goes.
Gina.
But look, I reckon I've worked something out today. The world ain't fair, but if you want it to change, you've got to start it at home. You've got to change how you are yourself.
Well, that's a very laudable lesson, I would say. I eagerly look forward to the born-again Miss Lestrade never gracing my courtroom with her presence again. Now, with regard to the murder of Mr. Pop Windybank, proprietor of pawnbrokery business on Baker Street, I hereby declare the defendant Miss Gina Lestrade.
Ah, finally the not guilty verdict. We did it, guys. We did it.
Okay, sure. That is all. Court is adjourned.
On a personal note, I must say you've surprised me, my Far Eastern friend.
Oh!
Despite being a Nipponese, you saw through the pretense to the malice that festered within that Englishman, and at the same time saw through the grime to the surprising heart of your English client. You have a curious talent for judging character, especially considering our very different cultures.
I don't think there's anything curious about it. Whether we're from the Empire of Great Britain or the Empire of Japan, we're all human beings. We're not so very different on the inside.
You know, I took this case for one very simple reason. To lock swords with you once again here in the courtroom.
You did?
When I encountered you for the first time 2 months ago, it reminded me of toasting friendship and trust with another Nipponese, only to find my trust betrayed. Through you, I hope to look into the eyes of the man I once knew and try to understand.
You mentioned something similar earlier today about total betrayal at the hands of the Japanese. What happened exactly?
Well, you may ask. And one day, when the time comes, you will learn the answer, whether you like it or not.
Alright then, I'll wait for the day if I must.
Coming to be known as the Reaper of the Bailey, and my retirement from service 5 years ago, it gives me cause to wonder if our meeting has some deeper purpose. So, farewell, my learned Nipponese fellow, until we meet again.
Well, guys, that was a great finale. But I'm very sorry, we already. No, we haven't yet reached the hour mark, but we're very close. And I think it would be fine if this is just one episode, and I'm going to record another one for the grand finale with the actual ending of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles Adventures and load it up as soon as possible. So thanks so much for watching until now, and if you want to see what the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles Adventures has in stock for us at the very, very last episode, you'll have to tune in next time. See you then.